The sky over my yard turned dark in the middle of the afternoon, and my hands went cold before my mind understood why. I was standing near my workshop, holding a wrench I had used 1,000 times, when the light dimmed like a curtain had been pulled across the sun. I looked up and saw shapes coming down through the clouds, one after another, too many to count, too smooth and too silent to be anything from this world. My neighbors were already running toward their homes, shouting for their children, slamming doors that would do nothing against something that large. I did not run. I could not, because standing behind me, on the porch where they had grown up, were the only two people in this universe I would never leave behind, Mira and Tessa, my daughters. And somehow, without anyone telling me a single word, I understood in that moment that all of this, every ship, every shadow crossing the sky, was coming for them. 15 years earlier, I was nobody important. I fixed engines and hauled scrap for a living on a quiet mining colony, far from anywhere anyone cared about. I was used to silence. I liked silence. I did not expect that silence to be broken by two small girls who fell out of the sky and changed everything I thought my life would be. It happened on an ordinary supply run. I was flying low over a dead stretch of rock when my scanner picked up a heat signature where no heat signature should exist. I almost ignored it. I told myself it was probably an old satellite falling apart. But something pulled me toward it anyway, some feeling I still cannot explain, and when I landed and pried open the wreck of a scorched escape pod, I found two children curled together so tightly that at first I thought I was too late. They were breathing, barely, but breathing. The older one had eyes the color of melted gold, and she stared at me without blinking, without fear, like she was deciding whether I was a threat or a rescue. The younger one was already reaching for my hand before I even offered it, small fingers wrapping around mine, like she had been waiting for someone, anyone, to show up. I did not know their names, I did not know their language, I did not know what world they came from, or why their pod had been burned black from the inside, like something had chased them out of the sky. All I knew was that I could not leave them there, and I could not hand them over to the guild office to be logged as unclaimed cargo and shipped off to some processing station where nobody would ever ask if they were happy. So I broke every rule I knew, and I took them home. I named the older girl Mira, because in those first weeks, she would sit by the window every evening and watch the sun go down with an expression of quiet grief, as if she remembered something she had lost but could not name. I named the younger one Tessa, because nothing seemed to frighten her for long, and within days she was laughing at the strange food I cooked, and the strange sounds our world made at night. Raising them was not easy, and it was not something I had ever planned for. I was a single man who barely remembered to eat dinner some nights, and suddenly, I had two children who needed more than food and shelter. They needed patience I did not know I had. They needed someone to sit with them when the nightmares came, though I never understood what those nightmares were about, because they never had the words to explain them, at least not in a language I understood. Slowly, I noticed things that should have told me who they really were. Mira could lift pieces of broken machinery that should have been too heavy for a child, especially when she was frightened, as if her strength grew with her fear. Tessa's eyes would glow faintly gold whenever she tried to tell a lie, which made her the worst liar I have ever known, and also one of the most honest people, once she learned that lying never worked on me. Neither of them ever seemed to get sick, not once, not even when half the colony caught a fever that kept children out of school for weeks. I told myself these were just strange traits, nothing more, because I did not want to think too hard about what they might mean. I did not want an answer that could take my daughters away from me. Years passed the way years do, quietly and quickly at the same time. I taught them how to read a star map, how to weld a broken pipe, how to argue their point without losing their temper, and how to apologize when they were wrong. Mira grew into someone who read every technical manual she could find, correcting my calculations by the time she was 12, always with a small, proud smile when she caught a mistake I had missed. Tessa grew into someone who could charm her way out of any trouble, talking her way past strict inspectors and stubborn shopkeepers with nothing but a smile and quick words. They called me Dad. I called them my daughters. That was the whole truth of our lives, as far as I was concerned, and I never needed any other explanation. There was one object from that first day I never got rid of. A small metal device, cracked and lifeless, that I had pulled from the wreckage of their pod all those years ago. I kept it in a drawer in my workshop, telling myself I would study it someday, though in truth, I think I kept it because it was the only piece of their past I had, and some part of me wanted to hold on to it, just in case. For 14 years, that device sat silent. Then one quiet morning, while I was repairing an old hauler engine, Tessa's voice called out from across the workshop, calm but strange, older than her years. She said something was transmitting from my workbench. By the time I reached the drawer, the little device was glowing, sending out a signal that had been sleeping inside it since the day I found it. A signal that had just woken up and reached out across the stars. I did not know what it meant then. I only knew that whatever it was too late to stop. 3 days later, the sky went dark, and the ships came down. That is where I found myself again, standing in my yard, wrench in hand, watching an entire fleet settle onto the ground, where I had once taught my daughters how to weld metal together. The largest ship lowered a ramp, and soldiers stepped out first, their armor polished and unfamiliar, their weapons carried but never raised. Behind them came an older woman in robes finer than anything I had ever seen, her expression sharp and searching, until her eyes landed on my daughters standing behind me. Her composure broke completely. She said words I did not expect to ever hear, directed at 2 girls raised on scrap metal and quiet dinners. She called them by titles, not names, and she said that her people had searched for them for 15 years without rest. Then, in front of hundreds of soldiers, in front of my neighbors peeking through their windows, she lowered herself to one knee in the dirt of my yard. One by one, the soldiers behind her did the same. Then the ones still standing on the ramps. Then more, spreading outward, until it seemed the entire fleet had gone still and silent, kneeling in a yard that still smelled like engine oil and dust, because of 2 girls I had once held, one in each arm, inside a burned-out pod on a forgotten moon. Mira's hand found mine, and though her fingers trembled slightly, her voice did not. She said we needed to talk, and for the first time since the ships arrived, I let myself believe that whatever came next, we would face it together. The woman introduced herself as a chancellor, someone who represented a great council from a distant part of the stars none of us had ever heard of. She explained that many years ago, a rebellion had torn through their government, leaving only 2 children of the ruling family alive, smuggled away in a pod built in secret, and sent into the unknown, with no guarantee it would even survive the journey. She explained that ever since, their people had lived through years of conflict, divided and searching, because no side could claim peace while the rightful heirs remained missing. She turned to me then, and there was something almost gentle in the way she spoke, as if she understood exactly how much she was about to ask of me. She said that the girls needed to return with her, that ceremonies and duties awaited them, that an entire people had been waiting 15 years for this exact moment. I looked at my daughters, and for the first time since the ships landed, I felt real fear, not for myself, but for what I might lose. Before I could speak, Tessa answered for both of us. She said, clearly and without hesitation, that I was coming with them. The Chancellor tried to explain that this was not how things were normally done, that there were customs and traditions older than any of us standing in that yard. Mira cut her off before she could finish, and there was a strength in her voice that I had heard before, the same strength she used the day she stood up to a guild officer twice her size over an unfair charge. She said I was not a servant, and not simply a guardian assigned by chance. She said I was her father, the one who had stayed awake through every nightmare, the one who taught her everything she knew, and that fact did not disappear just because a fleet had finally found them. The Chancellor studied the 2 of them for a long moment, 2 lost heirs to a throne she had spent 15 years searching every corner of the galaxy for, and then she looked at me, an ordinary man in a worn jacket, holding a wrench I had forgotten I was still gripping. She knelt again, and this time I understood that it was not only for my daughters. She said it would be written from that day forward that her people owed a debt to the man who had kept their future alive when no one else even knew it existed. I still do not feel like someone anyone should kneel to. I was simply a man who found 2 children in a wreck and could not make himself walk away, no matter what rules I broke or what silence I gave up. But if 15 years of small dinners, patched clothes, quiet lessons, and late-night talks were enough to bring an entire fleet to stand still in my yard with their heads bowed, then maybe it was worth it after all. Because in the end, no title, no crown, and no fleet of ships could change the only truth that ever mattered to any of us. Mira still could not cook a proper meal to save her life. Tessa still could not lie without her eyes giving her away. And neither of them had stopped being my daughters, not for one single moment, even now that the universe had finally noticed exactly who they were.